Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of About Abroad, where it's my job to introduce you to people who have built amazing lives for themselves in various foreign corners of the globe. We're talking with expats and thought leaders about moving abroad, remote work, visas, and all the fun and practical knowledge that you need to know to follow in their footsteps. If you've ever dreamed of making a life for yourself overseas, maybe working remotely or embracing long-term travel, retiring or studying abroad, or even just taking a peek inside life beyond your borders, you've landed in the right place. This episode is brought to you in partnership with my friends over at Kona. Those of you that have been listening to the show for a long time know that I am a huge fan of the remote work movement. However, I also recognize it comes with some challenges. One of those challenges that plagues many remote teams is employee burnout or employee dissatisfaction with their jobs. This is really hard to monitor as a leader when your teammates are not sitting face to face with you in an office anymore. But that's what Kona was built to tackle, and they've done a phenomenal job. The co-founders over there are friends and people who have truly built something to help people and help remote workers more specifically. So I love what they're doing. It makes a huge impact for their customers, and I'm excited to partner with them here. You can find out more and get 15% off your team subscription by going to the link in the show notes and using the code CHASE at checkout. Feel free to ask me any questions. I highly recommend this product and am excited to hear what the About Abroad community thinks. Check out the link in the show notes and use the code CHASE at checkout to get 15% off your subscription. My guest today is my good friend, Darcy Boles, who I've wanted to have on the podcast for a really long time, and I finally found the perfect excuse to do so. She and I have just been hanging out at the Grow Remote Summit in Ireland, which we were both completely blown away by. And so we get into a little bit of our experience there, but then we go straight into her upcoming plans to move to Portugal, and more specifically the Portugal move to the island of Madeira, which many of you have probably heard by now is becoming one of the leading places for expats and foreigners to move to for a variety of reasons. And she and her husband just went there and scouted it out. They've just decided to make the move, but this is a long time coming, and they're doing a lot of things right that I wish I would have done in retrospect when making my first move abroad. So we wanted to get into all of that, take you through their journey, how they went from this dream to it becoming a potential reality, and some of the steps they're taking along the way. She shared some amazing insights. So a lot of fun packed into this one, a little bit of Ireland, a little bit of Portugal, and of course, some remote work expertise from one of the leading future of work thought leaders in the entire world. I had a blast. Please help me in welcoming Darcy to About Abroad. Yeah, I had such a blast being back in Ireland. It was my first time. I didn't realize this when I got there, but it was my first time in 7 years. And I think we both experienced, again, why that country is just such an epic place to travel to.
Yeah, Ireland is wild. It's my first time ever in this country. I've been to parts of the UK before, and right now I'm in Northern Ireland, which I'm learning a ton, obviously, about Irish history and how Northern Ireland is part of the UK. And as American, we don't learn that a lot, like in school, right? And especially the history. So it's been really cool to both experience kind of the Republic of Ireland and also now be in Northern Ireland. And man, the Irish are so hospitable.
They are. That, I swear, like after being gone for so long, I totally forgot about that. Like not really forgot. Like I remembered like, oh, the gift of the gab and like people are really talkative and friendly, but that hospitality, I mean, we both experienced it, like at the Grow Remote Summit was over the top. Like I had such a good time just like hanging out and talking with people.
Same. And just everybody from all different walks of life. And I think that what was extra cool about the Grow Remote Summit, and I was just talking to somebody else about this morning, was like there were a lot of policy makers there and a lot of people like when I think about a policymaker, sometimes I think about somebody who's like, wouldn't have a beer with me or wouldn't be able to gab or have like a joyful conversation. And that's obviously just such a ridiculous stereotype and perception. Like I know that is so naive of me, but to just be able to talk about remote work and this thing that in the world of media right now is just being shunned, and to talk to like policymakers in Ireland who are saying, bring remote workers here. Like we want to capitalize on like this. This is awesome. We need more remote jobs was just such a breath of fresh air.
Oh, it totally was. I was joking with my wife. I was saying like I never heard so many F-bombs dropped up on the stage either. Like there's just this like freedom and lightheartedness about the like you heard politicians standing up there being like, nah, we need more effing remote workers and like I was just like, this is awesome. It feels like, and then being like, we'll go have a pint afterwards and we'll talk about it. And you're like, I could actually hang out with you. And you're like the head of the board of tourism or whatever. It was so approachable.
Yeah, exactly. And I think where you and I both being Americans, and not to dog on America too much, but just I think we just have a different perception of what a politician is and what we've experienced. Or I have at least.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. It was a lot of fun. And like you talked about like the differences between Northern Ireland and Ireland. It's funny because I've spent a ton of time in the Republic of Ireland. I spent like 6 months there at once. I had traveled there multiple times before that and just like loved the country for a while, but I have somehow never made it into Northern Ireland. Do you notice a drastic difference in any way? Like you kind of touched on that already, but I didn't know if there's anything that stands out to you.
I mean, I think there's a couple things. Obviously, I'm not well versed in the history and kind of the tension as well. I mean, there's obviously a massive difference that they use the sterling and they're part of the UK technically. A lot of the schools are still segregated by religion, which is fairly interesting. My friend's daughter goes to one of the only like unsegregated schools. And so that was just a really interesting kind of thing that's obviously come out of the tumultuous history of the country. And it's really interesting. I wouldn't say like from a tourism standpoint and somebody who's visiting here, I wouldn't have noticed these differences if I wasn't traveling, and asking a lot of questions to my friend who's from here.
Yeah, you're also like you're into that kind of thing like I am. So like we would ask those questions, but for maybe somebody just passing by, you might not see the difference. That was a really interesting thing too. Like I think people think about Ireland right now and they think about it in its present state, like this just like fun culture. You think about St. Patrick's Day and like happy thing, leprechauns and stuff. Like you're green, beautiful hills. And like, we just went to this conference where it's like the wide open economy. Like they have like headquarters of many of the world of Europe's major companies are based there in Ireland. So like economy's really thriving. It's like all very, very positive. But I heard John Riordan say during his presentation, he's like, we've gone from like a like, I don't know, but I can't remember the expression he used exactly, but it was like a laughing stock, like a very bad place to live to like a very great thriving place to live in a pretty short period of time. And it takes being there and hearing people talk about like the Troubles, for example, is like the history there in Ireland, which was not that long ago, where it was a very tumultuous place to live and they lost a huge percentage of their population. And so that transition over a short period of time is like pretty wild. And our perception of what Ireland has changed a lot very quickly as well.
Absolutely. And I think it's going to continue to change, especially with like the remote work movement and a lot of people moving to Ireland. And I'm now just all I want to do when I get back home is just like start watching all the movies and reading all the history books. Like I now just want to know everything.
I fell in love too. I totally get it. Well, I had a blast there. Anything else you're looking forward to doing? You still got a little bit more time. Anything else on the list, or are you just hanging out with your friend, catching up?
I'm just hanging with my friend, catching up. So my friend actually runs something called the Wave Project, and it's a surf project in the UK for mental health. So kids who are kind of in the social system or troubled, they work with GPs and the social system here to kind of bring kids out into the water and help them realize that they can do things and a lot of self-confidence. So I'm just kind of in awe, and I'm just learning more about that. And I know she has a session this afternoon, and we're both going to take tomorrow off and e-bike around kind of this. I'm in a place called Portrush, it is crazy hot today. Like it's never this hot here. And we're just going to like go to the beach and get in the water in Northern Ireland without a wetsuit on, which is crazy.
Sounds wild.
And explore. So I'm just really excited to see a little bit more of the countryside and the surf culture here.
Amazing. That's what a cool initiative. That's her project, or she's working as part of it?
She's working as part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, that's awesome. That's incredible. I had a friend that worked for an initiative where I think just so many of us just take this for granted, right? Like I grew up in North Carolina, but it was like 3 hours drive, which is like a coastal state for anybody that doesn't know. But it was a 3 hour, 4 hour drive from where I grew up to the ocean. And there was this initiative taking inner city kids from there out to the ocean for the first time. And at one point, some big donor donated a plane to like fly them down there. Like they would literally drive down to the ocean and drive back the same day. They're talking like hundreds and maybe like 500, 600, 700 kids that they would do this one big day, like drive to the beach, show them the beach, and they would just be like blown away by this magnificent thing that is the ocean, and then bring them back that day. So it's a long day. But at one point, somebody donated a freaking plane to fly them down there and do that. And so like that story always stuck out in my mind. But she said it was such an impactful project for her because it was like, you just realize this thing is just the ocean, you know, for many of us that we've seen so many times and take for granted. And it's like so impactful for people that don't get to experience that very often.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember my mom grew up in a landlocked state in the US, and she told me about the first time her dad years and years and years ago took them to the Atlantic City, and she saw the ocean for the first time. She said like her eyes were just open to another world. And it was kind of the first story I'd talked to somebody about ever seeing the ocean, because I grew up coastal as well. And yeah, I think it's just such an incredible experience. And you realize like we're all really connected by this one giant thing.
And it takes up like a majority of the planet.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of ocean, very natural segue. I am so stoked to talk to you because a little bit of context for people. Like we were hanging out, you know, here in Ireland. We had this like amazing experience doing all the remote work stuff that Darcy and I are both involved in. And we started talking about the last time we hung out, which was at Running Remote in Lisbon, which was in the middle of your journey exploring Portugal. And I'll let you tell a little bit more of the background, but just for like some pre-context, like the way I understood it was that you were exploring Portugal as a place to possibly move to with your husband, Dan, and you were scouting out some different locations. And I was like, oh, it'd be really cool if and when you figure that out to like discuss that on the podcast, because I think that a lot of people are going through that same journey. They're like thinking about Portugal in particular. It's the number one place in the world for people to move to. But, you know, just in general, like thinking through that process of like, how do you go about this? And some people just pull off the Band-Aid. Like they're like, I'm going to move to Bali, and they just go. And some people do it very methodically, and then there's everything in between. And I love the approach that you're taking. So I want to get into all of that. That's the pre-context, and I'll let you fill in any gaps, and then we'll get into where you're actually going. But did I miss anything there in kind of the background story?
I think one thing, but I'll fill it in, which is totally fine. So Portugal wasn't just like a decision on this trip. So I actually went on an around the world trip when I was in 2010, and I went to 35 different countries, and Portugal was the first country I went to. And I remember I was only supposed to go for 3 days, and I ended up staying for 3.5 weeks. I got there, and there was like something that overcame me in my body that I was like, I'm going to live here someday. And this is almost 14 years ago. And so that's always sort of been in the back of my mind. Like, I know there's been obviously like a huge expat revolution, as you mentioned, in Portugal, and there's been a lot of governmental initiatives, but there had always sort of been this like Portugal thing. And on my list of things I wanted to do before I die, which I still have, is become fluent in Portuguese, own a house in Portugal. And this all started 14 years ago. So when I met my husband, I was like, hey, I really want to move to Portugal. And he's like, well, I'm not going to agree to that because I've never been, but I'm open to going to exploring. So for our honeymoon, which is I was at Running Remote on my honeymoon. Don't worry, I didn't work too hard, but I did pop in and say hi to people. We did make it a scout trip. It was kind of like, we're at the point of our lives. We're newly married. We both own our own businesses. I'm a little more location independent than my husband is, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But we were like, let's just kill two birds with one stone, and like, let's go to all the places we think we would want to live. A lot of places I'd been to before we went back to, and Dan went to the first time. And then we checked out Madeira Island, which have heard so much about. And it also happens to be on the exact same longitude line as where we live in Southern California right now, which makes a huge difference for us in choosing to move there, because one of the reasons we live in San Diego and are in Southern California is for the flora and fauna. It's for the soil. We grow a lot of our own food. It's for the weather. It's for a very similar lifestyle that Madeira has to offer. And our big thing is we don't want to leave where we love unless it's for a place that is equally as awesome and has the same type of resources that we have access to from a nature standpoint now.
That is amazing. Those are some things that I think a lot of people won't actually wouldn't even think to consider, like the longitude being similar to where you were before, and the and like growing your own food and stuff like these. These are amazing extra attributes. So, okay. So you guys, you had this like love affair with Portugal. You it was always there in the back of your mind. And then you guys intentionally set out to go explore it on your honeymoon. And you ultimately land on Madeira. Can you take us through the trip itself, like the exploration trip, some of the places you visited, roughly how long you were there, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's longitude. It's either longitude or latitude. It's it's the same line. So hopefully I got that right.
Fatty laddie, I think.
Lat is fat.
Latitude.
So latitude.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
Whoops.
Whoopsies.
I didn't catch it, so my fault too.
It's all good. So we started in Lisbon, and we decided to go up to Cascais, which is a huge expat community. And I think a lot of people running remote actually live in Cascais who are expats. And we loved it there. It was beautiful. And every town we went to, just to preface, we went with the mindset of like our first whole day, we'd walk around like, where's the vet? Because we're going with our dog. Where's the doctor's office? Where's the pharmacy? Would it be easy to get groceries here? Would we need a car? So we went really intentionally, like with a mindset of, sure, yes, we were on vacation and like not naive to that life isn't a vacation, but we absolutely had this mindset every place we went. My husband loves to tinker. He loves to build. He loves to garden. So we looked for garden stores. We looked for hardware stores. Literally, I would look on Google Maps when we were driving and be like, okay, there's a hardware store here. Let's stop and get a coffee and like just walk in and check it out. Can we get certain things here? So maybe a little different to most people's honeymoons laying on a beach. But that's how
I was thinking that.
So that's how we spent ours. So we went to Cascais for 3 days. Then we came back to Lisbon for running remote. Then we rented a car and we went up to Ericeira, which is a beautiful surf town, just like an hour and 15 north of Lisbon on the coast. It's actually very similar to where we live in Southern California about 50, 60 years ago. Great surf culture. We surfed there for 3 days and did yoga, and it was awesome. We were like, we could totally live here. This is where we want to move. And we hadn't been to Madeira yet. And so we go to Ericeira, and then we came back to Lisbon, and we flew to Madeira. And our first day in Madeira, we were like, okay, this island, it feels pretty small. Like, I don't know. I'm only seeing one part of it. Could we live on an island? Would we get island fever? I don't know about this. So this is like our initial, like, I love everybody here that I've met. Went to dinner with a few people that I know down there. And then we rented a Jimny. So for those of you who don't know what a Jimny is, it's a tiny little Suzuki Jeep, off-road Jeep, 4x4, that looks like a Barbie Jeep with a rooftop tent. And yes, we went camping on our honeymoon as well. We did stay in hotels so we could get a shower. But, and we just started driving everywhere. We had no plans. We had a map, and we just decided we were going to drive all across the island and stop and camp in places that felt good. And we started to go around certain corners, and every time we went around a corner, like, I can't tell you how many times we said, oh my God, like, oh my God, oh my God. All of these houses have tiered gardens. Like, my husband is such a garden nerd. It's amazing. But you should have seen, he was like, every house is a tiered garden? Like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, this is part of the culture. And then just started meeting so many expats that moved there. And I think the other thing that like really attracted us there, not as only aside from like the culture and all of the festivals that they have, is that Madeira's motto, like as a island, is it's either Madeira belongs to us or Madeira belongs to all. And it's incredibly inclusive. Like when I would talk to people, I'd talk to people on the mainland a little bit about, hey, we're thinking about moving to Portugal. And there's always sometimes a little bit of a reaction of, oh, wow, a lot of people are moving here. Oh, wow, we have a housing crisis. Like, oh, wow. And so there's sort of a little bit of that. I can totally understand why, like more people, what are they going to do? What's the government going to do about housing for us, like as locals? And on Madeira, it was, oh, you want to buy a house? My parents are selling their house. You want their number? Like, I mean, in hotels, the guys were showing us like their secret surf spots and like putting them on a map for us. And like, there was just this deep sense of like, even more so than other places I've been, of like welcoming, like, oh, please move here. Like, we would love to have you. And I hope that wasn't a unique experience, but it really seemed to be part of the deep culture branding of the tourism board. The way that they do things is just so welcoming. And there's a lot of digital nomads and expats there. And, you know, we talk a lot about this in the remote world is like, and I think digital nomads struggle with it. They'll move to a place that they think is really cool. And then the locals are like, we don't actually want you here. And that doesn't benefit anybody.
You know, what's really interesting on that point, the community thing is totally overlooked when people first start thinking about moving abroad, you know, painting a broad stroke here. But I can say in my previous experiences, like moving to a handful of different countries for a long time, I totally overlooked that. Interestingly, hearing from like one of my sponsors, Make My Move, the people there say like they help people find these communities that are enticing people with financial incentives to come move there. Like our friend Aaron from Tulsa Remote, there has started, you know, with here's $10,000 to come move to Tulsa. But as Aaron alluded to, or not even alluded to, as he said directly, and as the people at Make My Move would say, like that is not really what entices people. What really entices them is the inclusion into the community, all the activities around that say like, hey, we want to bring you in and like actually welcome you. And the communities that do the best are the ones that have those open arms saying like, hey, we want you guys. We want the quote unquote foreigners from outside our community to come live here and bring not just your financial means, but bring in your culture, bring in your differences of opinions and everything that you can add to this community. And that little melting pot that is built from that is like that's where the magic happens with these movements.
100%. And I think, you know, obviously Gonzalo Hall, we have him to thank for a lot of like kind of the community development, especially in Ponta del Sol. But I remember being there and he sent me a text of like the community events that were happening. And it was dog walking at the local shelter. It was all of these like things that were really into Startup Madeira. We're solving problems on the island together, like come to this like mutual brainstorm and we can solve these problems together with different brains and diversity from different places in the world. And it's just, I think in a lot of ways, not a lot of ways, it is like that mindset is so much more progressive than a financial incentive. Like I want to be in a place that aligns with my values, with people who care about the same stuff, that we're working towards the same goal. And I think that that's something I see in all of Portugal is you see these old buildings and then there's modern architecture and they're making old better, and they, of course, some things are being torn down, but I think there's this from what I've experienced, and this is my own opinion, is just there's just a sense to just build better. And that's something that I want to be a part of and around a large dominant culture of people who want to do that. I don't want to be a minority culture in a dominant culture that doesn't think that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we haven't even gotten to this about Madeira yet, but like I had the chance to visit it earlier this year for the first time and hung out there in Ponta del Sol and traveled around a bit. Gonzalo took me on an amazing tour with a group, and we drove all over the island and saw like the thing that stood out to me was the insane biodiversity and natural beauty of that place. Like people call it, I think someone called it like, or it's maybe people know this and it's in the back of my mind, like the Hawaii of Europe or something like that. But when you're there and you're like driving on these cliffs that are like, and there's like waterfalls shooting out of the side of some mountain, and there's jungles and rocky volcanic beaches, and like all on this tiny island. It's kind of insane. Like it took me a while to like take it all in.
It takes a while. It took us a while. I mean, we were on the island for, I think, 12 days, and we're going back this November to see it in a different season. Because as you mentioned, it's very biodiverse. There's a lot of microclimates. It is the rainy season in the fall, winter, and we're going to go back and we're going to go experience it in a different season. Like, as you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, like we're not just upping and moving. Like this is a huge life decision. Like we're moving our lives to another country. We're immigrating, and like, we both said to each other, like, if it rained the whole time, would that change our decision? And the answer is no, but we just want to experience it in a different season before we like fully make the move. And yeah, the biodiversity is just insane. And when Dan and I were there, we kept saying to each other, like, we found Neverland. And anytime we'd go around, so anybody who's listening to this podcast has seen the movie Hook, you'll know what I'm talking about. Anytime we'd go around another corner that looked so beautiful, we would both yell at each other, "Bangarang!"
Oh, I really hope people listening can appreciate that. And if not, go watch Hook and then you can.
So just look for Bangarang in that movie and it'll make sense. But that was just something, but it was Neverland with intention. It was Neverland with culture. It was Neverland with this sense of like growth and development and intentionality to enjoy life, but also to keep the island really clean, to keep the island pristine. Like that was so like indicative of every beach we went to. There were trash cans everywhere. There were signs to put your trash away. There was like, it wasn't even assumed, it's taught. It's like, if you smoke, fine. Here are ashtrays to bring with you to your towel at the beach. It's not
That's
don't
amazing.
smoke.
Yeah.
It's
and don't
fine,
just throw the butt in the sand
right
afterwards or in the ocean.
I'm going to do this for you. And then I think the other thing that was so fascinating was the access for people with disabilities, like the amount of wheelchair ramps and like gondolas down to the beach, and just the accessibility for elderly and people who may be like physically disabled was like, as a tourist, was overwhelmingly powerful. I took that in and I took that away with me for sure.
Well, that speaks to the motto you were talking about, right? Like Madeira is for all, like that it's all inclusive. And it's cool. I think when you go to a place like that, what it says to you, even if you don't need those services, like right now, it just says like, this could be a forever kind of place, which is really nice. Like when you think about moving across the world, you don't know what the future holds. You know, you're not like committing to anything for forever, but I think you want to be able to see yourself there for some longer period of time at this chapter in life.
Yeah. I mean, my husband, Dan, and I have said to ourselves, like, and we've made a very conscious decision to never have children, and we won't have kids to take care of us when we're older. We do want to be in a community that's accessible, that we're able to get around, that eventually, hopefully, we will build a community within. And I hope that's Madeira. Like, obviously, we're moving there first, and that's our goal for long term. Anything can change, and the world could turn upside down in a second, like we've experienced. But there is that intentionality around, thinking about long term and where we want to be when we're old, much older.
Where more specifically on the island, did you like get a sense of a place that you are kind of interested in living in, like a city, rural, anywhere that called to you?
I think we'd probably I think we definitely want to be what they call below the banana line, which is on the south side of the island. It's a little sunnier over there, and I'm a total lizard. But that said, we're going to spend probably a year just outside of Funchal, which is like the main city and where the airport is, and kind of where just the majority of the population on the island lives, just to get a feel and spend time in each one of the kind of the little towns. I don't think we're ready to buy a house. We want to feel it out. We really want to find the right like long-term homestead for us. Like, we're building a homestead. We want 3 dogs. My husband wants to be fully self-sustainable. So we're fishing at home, and we're growing the vegetables at home that we can grow in Madeira right now. And I'm starting to practice cooking with them. And so again, just thinking about, okay, what things translate, which is quite a few things, fortunately for us right now. And then making that decision as we continue to map it and feel it out. Like, it's a big decision again, and we want to do it in the way that feels the best for us. And I'm sure timing and relationships, I mean, that's the other thing about Madeira and Portugal, is it's such a relationship-based culture. Like, so much comes from building deep relationships. And I'm sure things will come from that too, and making friends.
Yeah. I 100% agree. I mean, there'll be like really cool connections built through those kind of activities and learning. And speaking of that, it's a good time to mention, like, you guys are documenting this whole process, right? So like there's going to be I can imagine there's going to be like a little community following around this YouTube channel that you guys have created.
Yeah, we just released the first episode. It's the Mayfields moved to Madeira, and the link will be in the show notes. But we are going to be documenting the entire process, everything from a lot of the resources that we have found. I mean, obviously, some of them thanks to you. I know when Allison Baxley was on this podcast, we went to our entire Portugal summit the whole next week. And we'll be sharing a lot of our resources, a lot of kind of what we're doing with our taxes as LLC owners in the States. We're going to be documenting me learning how to drive stick shift, which is going to be ridiculous, I'm sure. Gardening, fishing at home with the sim tactics we'll be using over there. We live by the beach, and I just got my husband a beach cast pole, and then I go deep sea with a good friend a lot of the time as well. So just kind of documenting the entire process and the ups and the downs, and hopefully it'll provide some value to people for a blueprint that they can take away.
We'll be right back to the show after a quick break for a note from our sponsor. Hey everyone, I am so excited to announce a new partnership with International Living. They are one of the leading organizations in the world helping people move abroad. And I actually got my start moving abroad via International Living when they inspired me to move to Ecuador many years ago. Long story for another day, but I will be teaching a course with the International Living team about moving to Spain, talking about some of the visa options available, and a little bit about why I have chosen to call this country home of all the places in the world. So you can learn more via the link in the show notes and get a specialized discount only available through the About Abroad affiliate link there in the show notes. Go and check it out, sign up, and I hope to see you there. Hey everyone, so many of you have written in asking why I've never done a Q&A only session on the podcast, and to be honest, I don't know why, so let's make it happen. Go over to aboutabroad.com and find the contact form, or just email me directly, chase@aboutabroad.com, with any questions that you have related to remote work, moving abroad, digital nomadism. Anything that we talk about here on the show is fair game. I can't promise I'll get to every single question, but we will do a questions only podcast coming up in the next few weeks. And for that, I want to hear from you. What would you like to hear me talk about? Hit me up at chase@aboutabroad.com, or go to aboutabroad.com and find the contact form and send me your questions. Thanks. Looking forward to hearing from you. Just really quick, we don't need to go deep on this stuff, but that's what the Mayfields move to Madeira thing is for. But is from like a business entity, tax, and I'm going to wrap up immigration stuff. Are you trying to manage all that on your own, or are you hiring some outsiders, or what are some of the major building blocks that you're kind of putting in place in that regard?
100% hiring outsiders and people who have done this before. Yeah, absolutely. Like, why would I learn the entire tax strategy when people professionally do that for a living? So we are leaning on a lot of resources that we've found through YouTube channels, through blogs, and we're just starting to build relationships with a lot of those people. Everything from immigration and helping kind of package up our visa applications to we have a meeting with a tax strategist at Fresh Portugal next month to kind of figure out what do we need to do in our businesses in the States to make sure that everything's kind of right on paper to be in alignment with and in timing with the move. I think that's another thing when people just up and move, they don't think about like, that's kind of a big deal. And we're filing joint in the States now, and that's different. And there's all of these nuances. So We are absolutely for those types of things. When it comes to anything legal, when it comes to anything kind of from a governmental immigration standpoint, we're hiring people. And I think it's worth our time and money. And then our time is better spent on our businesses where we can make money doing what we know how to do best. And people who know what they know how to do best should be making money doing that.
Let's all live in our own little zones of genius and hire each other.
I love that term.
Be in there. It just makes so much sense. Like you said it perfectly. Like this is not the time to reinvent the wheel, to try to relearn something that someone else can do for you. And I think for most of us, like the cost of doing this is so affordable. Like people are shocked sometimes. I don't mind saying like I'm rough numbers here. Don't like quote me on it, but it was something like for our visa renewals, I want to say we spent around $800, which was like, maybe $1,000 or something in total for like a 6-month process that involved multiple lawyers. For me, I mean, it probably saved me 100 hours. It's like the best return on investment ever. And I know there's an older version of me, like a predated version of me that would have been like, I can do this. Like the website says exactly what to do. And then I would just beat my head against the wall for like months and then eventually hire that person anyway to clean up my mess. So
yeah,
I've learned
100%. And at what point in your kind of journey moving abroad did that like click? Because I know you've been living abroad for 8 years? Is it longer than that now? Yeah.
I mean, I moved abroad multiple times for shorter stints, like left the country, came back. This has been almost 6 years that I've been gone on this most recent stint, I guess. And I tried, so like at least 6 years ago, like the first time we did our visa application, we did it all on our own and it was a pain. And then like for renewals from there, it was just like, no, just hire somebody, even though we already know the process and the process is like repeatable in a lot of ways. It's so much easier just to have someone walk you through it and expedite things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not to get too much into remote work, because I know we're talking about abroad, but it's the same thing. Like if somebody's been doing this a long time and they know the nuances that exist and the things that change often, like it's important to go to those people who've done it. Like there are so many mistakes that have been made in this world. And I hope that people learn from my mistakes and I want to learn from their mistakes. And I want to hire the people in the governmental entities and all of these crazy, nuanced, complicated international relocation things that are great at it. So
yeah, 100% agree. I mean, it's for me, it's something that like I just push on here all the time. Like just we said it a little bit ago, but it's we should all try to just live in our zone of genius. So you mentioned what was it, Fresh Portugal, I think was any other entities or like anybody you would recommend if someone was following in your footsteps that they should maybe Google search?
Yeah, and we'll post all of these links as well on our YouTube channel when the certain episodes come out that align with it. But we're using I can't think of her last name, but her name is Heather, and her business is called Boots on the Ground Portugal. And she helps people really with their visa packages to make sure all the right paperwork is in place for the right visa, what requirements are in place that you need for the right visa. And she did this herself, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, and then started a business out of it. And so for something like that, we're actually going with somebody who moved over from the same country that we're moving over from, because her process is going to be almost identical to what ours was, but she's also paying attention to what's changing, the requirements that are changing, and she's got her finger on the pulse of that. And then Fresh Portugal, they are Portuguese tax experts, but they work internationally and specifically with U.S. expats. So that's what we're really looking for when we're looking for kind of these, I wouldn't say brokerages, but like these this help abroad, is what's the most in alignment with our situation, and will that be the best for us? So
yeah, that's a very good point, because this is why it's so important to hire professionals in this area, because every situation is so nuanced. Like your situation is 2 Americans coming from self-employment in the US and moving to Madeira Island in Portugal. And like, there's so many factors there that could change. Like you could be from the US and Dan could be from Canada or from Spain, or, You could be one employed by a W-2 full-time employee and one self-employed. And you could be moving to a country that has different social security system. Like all these things change. The fact that you're coming from the US means you're going to always continue to have to deal with the IRS in the US versus somebody who moves from Canada isn't going to have to do that. So there's like a lot of nuance, and you getting somebody who's walked in your shoes and done exactly what you're about to do is so crucial. I 100% recommend that too. Yeah. All right. You're learning a lot already, and sharing a lot. So this is awesome. What are you concerned about? Like, what are your fears?
It's funny. I've been thinking about this move for 14 years. So, I mean, I'm definitely concerned. It's funny. I think my husband's mom is more concerned than anybody, and I'm going to talk about this for a second. So in the States, it takes us 15 hours to drive to visit my husband's family. And we normally drive. And it will take us 15 hours to fly home. So it's actually the same amount of time. And I actually think we're going to see her more, but she doesn't believe that yet until I think she comes over there. So, I mean, I have a concern about my parents getting older and not being able to travel as much. My parents are much older in relation to other people my age. That's definitely something I'm a little concerned about. There is a reality of living on an island. I'm not necessarily concerned about not being able to get off the island, but there is a reality of living on the island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And what will that be and feel like? And again, we really went with the mindset of what will this be and feel like? And we're going back again before we fully make the move. But like that's a reality. What else am I concerned about?
Those are good concerns though. Those are very those are excellent points to consider for anyone. My big thing from my standpoint is like, I miss family and friends, like especially as people get older, that like parents, definitely, grandparents, definitely. But then also just like, missing your niece and nephew grow up, or your best friend's first kid's birthday. And like, you're not a part of those things. And then at the same time, what you said is, and like, I don't want to downplay that. Like that's a very real thing. Like it causes some pain and even like animosity sometimes in certain relationships or situations. So it's a real thing. But there is another side to that coin, which is what you just said. And like, you can flip those things around and be like, well, I'll actually see you just as much or more, because what I end up doing is I end up getting a lot more quality time with people. I just went back to the US and spent 2 weeks in Naples, Florida with my parents, like just me and them at their house. And like, I would never do that if I lived in the US. Like we'd see each other, much more frequently, but they would be little weekends or a day here and there, and there'd be a lot of people around. Like that quality time is and you see it in a different way when you come from another country versus like just like driving down the road, even if it is 15 hours, like we're used to that kind of thing in the US. So this is a very real thing. And you have to decide on taking this mindset very intentionally.
It definitely is a mindset thing. And I think there's two other things that I'm not necessarily concerned about, but I'm more excited about is like, I mentioned, like we're making the conscious decision not to have children, but one of those reasons isn't because we don't like kids. Like we want to be able to have a property where our friends' kids can come over and experience Europe. Like come to the Mayfields camp, like come to Camp Mayfield, drop your kid off for 2 weeks. You guys go explore. And I think that like we don't raise kids in communities anymore. And that's something that like we're really excited to do is like the auntie and uncle in Portugal. I mean, that's one thing. And yeah, I think that's something very real. And two, at home where we live, like we have, I don't know it in meters, so I'm going to say it in feet, but we have a 600 square foot beach bungalow, and that's great. But I love to host. I love to cook. I love to have people over. We can't fit anybody out in our house. We put our camper van up and have somebody just sleep on the street in the top of the camper van, which is great. But like, there's also the reality of being able to have property, being able to have a space to bring people and help kind of like just have that hosting community. And I'm excited to do that for digital nomads on the island. Dan like can't wait to teach a gardening class. It's like, he's so excited. So I don't know, there's obviously two sides to the coin.
I mean, the guy, we can cut this out if we don't want to ruin everybody else's wedding in the future. But I mean, the guy grew the flowers for your wedding. Like, I want to take, gardening by Dan classes. So sign me up for that.
I'm sure he would love to teach you.
Those are some really, really good concerns, I think. And I wonder, like, I don't know. I'm curious if anything else pops up along the way. Like, I'll be interested to follow your journey and see what kind of like there will be some bumps in the road, no doubt. I think one of them is like, you're right. You're on an island. Are you planning on flying Blanche, your dog, to what's the route there, and what's the thought process with moving the dog?
Yeah, so I'm not sure yet. We're looking at that right now. There is canine jets. In the US, she can technically fly. She's a psychiatric service dog, and she was born and raised through Guide Dogs for the Blind. So anyone who's not familiar with that program, it's a nonprofit in the United States to train dogs to lead the visually impaired. And so she actually is fully trained, like, to sit at my feet. So we may have to see, but I just don't know what the regulations internationally are with that. If we fly from the States, there is a direct on Azores Airlines from New York to Madeira. So that's something we're going to actually explore. We're going to take that flight ourselves this fall. And so, yeah, and I'm sure I have a lot of questions for you too when it happens. And then also, a lot of other people I know have relocated their dogs to Portugal. And so that's something I'm sure we'll be sharing in the YouTube channel, but we learn a little bit more as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I figured one thing we haven't even mentioned, like you said you've been planning this for 14 years, but you're giving yourself like a 2-year timeline on this move, correct? Like from right now ish.
It's slowly getting smaller.
I
think it might be a closer to a year. And I think one thing you mentioned that I just thought of that, it is a concern, is not that Portuguese is a language barrier, but I'm a communicator and I love to be able to speak somebody else's language and be able to converse in the native language. So I'm currently taking Portuguese lessons. And that's something that I know that I'm going to get very frustrated with myself, because I'm going to want to be way more proficient than I am much quicker than I'm going to be. So that's a real thing too, just to blurt that in there.
That is a real thing. And in a place like Madeira, as opposed to Lisbon, for example, like there will be at least more of a language barrier. I think, like, I do think it's overcomable for most people. Like you're going to find a high level of English in Portugal in general, but I'm with you on that 100%. And I've said on the show like a bunch of times that you do lose this is something people should also, if you're like Darcy and you're a communicator and you get a lot out of those relationships that are built on communication, like you're going to lose a bit of yourself in that, learning to speak another language and or communicate with people who don't speak your native language like perfectly. Like there's something lost in translation. So that's a real pain point, like maybe minor compared to some of the others, but it can be a real pain point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so excited I'm learning the language right now. It's gorgeous and I love it, but it's going to take me a while. It's not easy, and it's going to take a lot of practice and a lot of talking with people and also making sure that people I'm slow. Just know that I'm learning.
Well, circling back to the dog thing really quick, like this is one reason why Madeira has sort of been, because I will be honest with you, I went there earlier this year. It's been on my radar. We're kind of like scouting out a handful of places that we might consider moving to. And Madeira is one of them. But a big downside for us is our dog is not a service dog certified, and there's no ferries to get to Madeira. Unlike, for example, the Canary Islands, there's ferries from mainland Europe there. And we've chosen to pretty much decide that we don't want to fly our dog again. Like he's big, he like Blanche, he's got to go in most planes, he's got to go, or every plane that I'm aware of, he'll have to go underneath the plane. It's been traumatic for him. We don't want to do it again. So that's been a thing for us. We're like, oh, and then also we have a camper van here on mainland Europe. And because there's no ferries, you'd have to like do a cargo ship kind of thing and to get it there. So there's always the option to sell it. And, we could, all these things are figure outable, but those have been kind of like question marks for us as to could Madeira be the place? Like those are real obstacles to overcome.
I totally feel you on that. And it's something we, didn't skim over as well and have thought long and hard because, it's not like we're not going to be leaving the island, and we probably won't be taking Blanche on every single trip we take. I take her on long trips, and if I'm moving somewhere for psychiatric help as well. But it's different in Europe than it is in the States, and the regulations are really different in Europe than they are in the States. And I'm not well versed in that yet, and I'm sure we'll share when we are. But we plan on having more than one dog, and our next dog will not be trained by guide dogs and will not be professionally kind of a 12th generation seeing eye dog. Like there is a difference, and that's a reality. And we want 3 dogs. And so we've really thought, if we have a homestead, the dogs are going to live in Madeira. Like that's going to be a reality that's going to be a part of our lives. And so something we've thought about is there's got to be somebody with a boat, and we're going to figure it out. It's all figure outable. Or do we buy a boat someday? Maybe, who knows? And maybe you and Allison and Coda come on it. But don't worry. Those
Canine boats.
The canine boats. I mean, Canine Jets is doing great right now. Let me tell you.
What is Canine Jets? I don't know about this.
Okay, so Canine Jets is a new route from New York or New Jersey to London. And it's about, don't quote me on this cost, but I want to say it's around $8,000 for a human and a dog. So together. And it's a private jet, so it's kind of like flying first class, which is like a ticket first class to London is $6,000 anyway. So it's not cheap, but if you're going to make a huge move and know in advance and are budgeting for it, and your dog is not service registered, it is an absolutely wonderful way, from what I've seen and like read about, to get your dog over to Europe.
Totally. Yeah, that's going to sound like an astronomical number for some people, and I understand that, but it is not. Like actually, you could end up paying thousands of dollars just to like throw your dog underneath a plane. There's lots of ways around that, and you can do it for $250 too. But I'm just saying there's a lot of services in this space, and that is not astronomical considering what you're getting there. So, and
you're getting yourself over as well. And I think that's something that's really important to note. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Very cool. One last thing, or I hate to do that because you never know where the conversation is going to go, but one other thing, at least, that I definitely wanted to ask you about, it relates to your work, because you mentioned you are more location independent than Dan is. And this is part of the very like methodical approach to what you guys are doing. Like you're thinking through how to become either more location independent or how to transition his business to being, sustainable, given that you're moving abroad. And this is like, you guys kind of like epitomize what I hear a ton from people listening to the show. That's like, hey, I've been given location independence. I want to move abroad. My partner can't, or we have kids. And so like something is going to have to change. We're not really sure how to navigate it, but I know we can make it work. And like, I feel like that's a bit of where you guys are. So I was wondering if you could like kind of shed some light on that whole situation. Maybe also like introduce what you do a little bit professionally as well, because I think that's also relevant, and what you guys are thinking about from like the professional sense with regards to this move.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And you're right. It's such a reality in the world of remote work, and one partner having a remote job and the other not. And it's tough. So I'm a remote work engagement consultant. So I help companies basically work on engagement and connection, and also help transition them to remote. So effectively, I do head of remote work when it comes to kind of the engagement and culture space. So, fortunately, I run my own business. I can be from anywhere in the world, and if I work for other companies, I work as a contractor. And so that frees me up in a lot of ways to be able to work from a lot of different countries, and then obviously make sure that my taxes are paid in the right places. So for me, it's pretty easy. My husband is a professional freelance cinematographer. So while he works for himself, he's been working in Southern California for the last 10 years, and his network is in LA and is in San Diego and in Baja in Mexico. And he really kind of cycles through, that area. That said, if he's near an international airport, a lot of his gigs are international, but they're with Southern California production companies. So the way he's looking at it, and his company is called Mayfield Media, is that this isn't the end of Mayfield Media in the United States. It's an expansion of it globally. And I think that mindset has been really, really helpful. And he's also able to keep a few clients back in the States. I think, just offering, saying, maybe a little less on a trip because the flight might be a little bit more. But I think just being really, really clear with his clients, basically what he does, it is just because I'm moving doesn't mean I can't come back for these 2-week-long events that I've covered for 10 years. And I have a relationship with the production team. And I think too, staying in the industry. So he works primarily in the off-road and surf industry, like with a lot of rallies. And Europe is actually ripe for that. There's a lot of rallies. And he's worked with tourism boards. There's a lot of commercial stuff he does as well. And so it's really just about learning now to build those relationships with his current clients and just say, I actually want to help you expand. And so let's build relationships on an international level. And I'm your guy in Europe now. And so obviously it's a different way of thinking about things, but it's been really helpful in kind of starting to build those relationships asynchronously.
Very cool to see those two things come together. And I think that approach is so wise. Like there's two sides to this. One is like accepting there's some trade-offs when you do this sort of thing. Like we've all made trade-offs for certain things in our lives. Like the first time I decided to move abroad, I left like a job that was awesome, a company that was awesome, and eventually went from 100% pay cut to effectively a 50% pay cut over the course of a year. And like, I never looked back. It was like just part of the deal. So you accept that. You go, okay, I'm maybe gonna have to trade something. That's fine. But you can mitigate that risk a lot. And so by stretching this period out and saying like, how can I work this situation? Like I can make it work. I can talk to my current clients. I can try to transition some of my work to more remote. I can start making contacts now. Instead of seeing that as like insurmountable, seeing it as like, how can I use this situation to my advantage? Like his experience will be very relevant in the new place that you're going to. You're just transitioning those skills from one place to another. So I say that because I hear so often that people will say like, oh, I'm a banker in Dallas, and I really want to move to Lisbon, but like, I can't be a banker in Portugal. And it's like, so I don't have any skills. It's like, you have tons of skills, like all the things tons of skill. You have so many things that you could share. You just have to think about how to like morph that into your new reality. And so it's I love the way you guys are approaching it. It's a very long way of saying I love the way you guys are approaching it.
Thank you. And I will note something on what you just said. I mean, I've coached a lot of people kind of through this mindset shift over the last few years, just informally. And I remember once having a woman come to me who worked physically in domestic abuse shelters in the United States. And she was really burned out and she really wanted to get into remote work. And she's like, I don't have any skills. And I was like, you probably have more conflict management skills than anyone I've ever met. Being in the environment that you've been in for the last 15 years. And think about in remote work and in a space, if you're in people ops or you're in customer service, like the way that you can translate those conflict management skills into a remote environment, into a remote job, into a totally different industry. Like you actually do, everyone out there listening, like has tons of skills, and like just go back and write down in your life what you've done and just start to draw those lines with the jobs that you may want or like where you'd like to go. And you may start to see like way more of a through line than you ever expected.
That's really good advice. And I think like if you're listening to this and that resonates with you, really lean into it. Because it's I think it could be the difference between you deciding to make this leap and not. And if you feel, I always say, like, if you feel called to this lifestyle, like if you're like Darcy and 14 years ago, you stumbled into a country and you were like, I gotta be here. Like this has to be a part of my life. Then you owe it to yourself to at least try. And it's, it could be a life-changing decision, but it can start with just making a little tweak in your mindset, like in this regard. Awesome. I think it's a good place to finish up. I do want to say, like, for anybody listening, that we just briefly touched on Darcy's expertise in the remote work world, and she won't say it herself. She's a friend of mine and humble, and I'm biased, of course, but she is literally one of the best in the world in helping companies transition to remote. She's worked for companies like Airbnb, Stripe, TaxJar, some of the very best out there. So she brings a lot of experience, and I would definitely recommend getting in touch with her if your company's needing some assistance in that space. But setting that part aside, I just want to thank you, Darcy, for sharing your story. I'm looking forward to following the Mayfields Moving to Madeira channel, and we'll have links to all of these things in the show notes. But while people are listening, tell them where they can find you, connect with you, follow the channel, and anything else that would be relevant for them to connect with.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, thank you, Chase. I know we've been friends for a long time, and this is so exciting. I'm really excited to be, closer in Europe too. It'll be awesome. So you can find me. The best place to get in contact with me is on LinkedIn. So just find me on LinkedIn / Darcy Boles. And my website is shiftwithdarcymarie.com. And I have a newsletter that's coming out this summer. So feel free to sign up for that. It's called Work Doesn't Have to Suck, because it doesn't. And that has to do with life as well. So get ready for that. And yeah, LinkedIn is the best place to find me. Our YouTube channel is just released on YouTube. It is Madeira, the Mayfields Move to Madeira. Again, it'll be in the show notes, and we'll probably be releasing once a month as of right now, just based on bandwidth, but we will be sharing kind of all the resources that we're using to hopefully, pass along. And even if it's not Madeira or Portugal that you're moving to or thinking of moving to, just start shifting that mindset and thinking about how you could look for similar resources in however you choose to navigate this path of the compass of your life.
Amazing. Well put. Work doesn't have to suck, guys. Let's leave it on that. I love it. Thank you, Darcy. Great to see you. And we'll catch up again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chase.
Thanks for tuning in today from wherever you are in the world. Once again, I'm Chase, and this has been another episode of About Abroad. For those of you wondering how you can best support the show, I have made it super simple for you. Just go over to the show notes of the episode that you just finished listening to and click on one of the two following links. aboutabroad.com/newsletter to get our monthly newsletter, no spam, guaranteed, or ratethispodcast.com/aboutabroad, where you can quickly and easily leave a review for the show. It's not just important to me, it also helps more wanderers just like you find us. Finally, don't forget to subscribe on your podcast platform of choice, and we will see you again next week. Thanks again. Hasta luego, amigos.